What is Batman without his billions? Without the tech, without the armor, without the toys? That's the question this story dares to answer. Because Scott Snyder and Nick Dragotta's Absolute Batman isn't just another tale. It will change how you see the Dark Knight forever. It started on October 9th, 2024. And it is a line of comics that recontextualizes the characters we know. It's like no one is who readers expect them to be. The idea is key to understanding what makes Absolute Batman different. The whole universe is built around the idea of building around the reader's expectations. With that said, let's talk about what makes Bruce Wayne different, or at least this Absolute Bruce Wayne different. In Absolute Batman, Bruce Wayne is a 24-year-old blue-collar civil engineer by day. He grew up in Gotham's notorious crime alley instead of the Wayne Manor. Plus, his trauma, as in his backstory about losing his parents, is also different. Here, his father, Thomas Wayne, who is a teacher in this reality, was murdered in a mass shooting at a zoo. This trip to the zoo was actually a prize won from his class by inventing an engineering device. And as for his mother, Martha Wayne, she's still alive in this continuity. But what makes it even more personal is that Bruce grew up with the very people who will go on to be his greatest enemies. In this version, characters like Killer Croc, Two-Face, the Riddler, the Penguin, Matches Malone, and Catwoman were all kids from the crime alley. They were all basically his childhood friends. Gotham City itself is also portrayed with the unprecedented level of grit and realism. It is a place more grounded and raw than ever before. We're talking about a metropolis visibly shaped by pervasive corruption and crumbling infrastructure. And when you think about it, Batman's identity as a civil engineer also directly connects to Gotham's physical decay. Him being a vigilante is basically a hands-on struggle against a city literally falling apart. Or maybe you can say that during the day he helps build the city, at night he's out in the streets trying to keep it from crumbling again. I mean, maybe that's like a stupid analogy, but that's what it is. Engineer by day, trying to keep it from crumbling again by night in a different way. But anyway, the inclusion of Martha Wayne and the transformation of his childhood friends into eventual villains redoes the character's core motivations and emotional complexity in the way that feels both fresh and deeply resonant. And of course, all of this only works because of who's telling the story. It's Scott Snyder. We're talking about the man who was behind Court of Owls, Death of the Family, and 0 Year. If you know those stories, you already know he loves taking Batman apart and showing us the cracks. Court of Owls shatters Batman's sense of Gotham's history. Death of the Family dismantled his closest relationships, and 0 Year reimagined his origin, but Absolute Batman takes everything even further beyond. You see, the most radical and compelling shift in Absolute Batman is who Bruce Wayne is at his core. He doesn't have money, he doesn't have the mansion, and although Alfred, you gotta admit he is top G, is still in the picture, it's not in the way that we've seen him before as a butler. He's not a butler or even a father figure. He's a government operative sent to Gotham to monitor both the party animals and Batman, and even considers killing Bruce at one point. But as he watches Bruce struggle to fight for the city, he starts secretly helping him. Overall, as a blue-collar civil engineer from a humble background, this Bruce Wayne becomes even more relatable and more distinct compared to the other Batman of the multiverse. It makes his struggle and grind feel, more real and raw. Again, we need to go into the details of how the setting changes Batman's character. Starting from Gotham City, the city itself is like an active, decaying character. It's rampantly corrupt, dystopic city where the vast majority of the police force is on mob payrolls and mobsters operate with impunity. On top of that, Bruce being a civil engineer means he understands the city's physical decay better than anyone. And because the villains have been in control for so long, his fight as Batman feels less like crime fighting and more like trying to push against something that's already taken over. I mean, the level of chaos and corruption in Gotham City is so deep that it forces Bruce Wayne into truly desperate and morally compromising situations. Again, a significant portion of the police force is on mob payrolls, which allows criminal organizations to operate with impunity. So when Bruce is confronted with party animals, a terrorist gang led by the criminal mastermind Roman Sionis, aka the Black Mask, the situation becomes so critical that Bruce is faced with the choice of allowing the party animals to operate without Batman's interference for a week. In exchange, Batman will receive a large sum of money, and the gang would ease their terrorizing grip on Gotham. And you may ask the amount? Try 200 million. Of course, he had already planned ahead and was not going to honor the deal to the fullest, but that is still not something the traditional Batman would do. Next, if we're talking about the emotional core, then this is where the story truly innovates. Let's start with Bruce's origins. His father was killed in a mass shooting during a zoo trip, which was a trip Bruce had earned for his class by inventing a device as part of a school project. This unique trauma instills a specific personal guilt in Bruce as he feels the overwhelming need to become a force that can prevent the kind of loss he experienced as a child. His mother being alive adds to this because it shifts the core trauma from a double loss to a single but more focused one. We've also talked about how the primary villains grow up with him in this universe, which in turn creates a complex relationship and dynamic with his past and his adversaries that he once called friends. For example, in issue 6, Bruce stumbles into Wayland's gym. He's injured and out of options, so he tells him the truth that he's Batman and he needs help. Not just from Wayland, but from all their old friends from Crime Alley. So he finally reveals his identity to the whole group. Most of them are furious that he kept it a secret for so long, except for Eddie, who casually says he figured it out weeks ago. Of course he did. Anyway, what I want to point out here is that his friends are going to be villains later. Wayland becomes Killer Croc, Eddie becomes the Riddler, Ozzy becomes the Penguin, and so on. And the thing is, Scott Snyder's take on Batman in this series is all about what it means to be a hero when the odds are completely against you. Batman still stands for idealism, collectivism, resistance, and that inherent belief that we can always still make a difference, but because he doesn't have the money or tech of the classic Batman that we've all grown and loved, Bruce sometimes turns to violence that feels dirty or morally gray, which I'm absolutely okay with. Of course, it's never just about being edgy or just for the sake of shock. It's simply a pragmatic tool. Like that $200 million deal with Black Mask. He doesn't kill, of course, which I'm cool with him not breaking that no kill. You got to keep that as is, but you can feel how close he's getting to it. Overall, the Absolute Universe is built on the idea that heroes don't always get to win in the ways we're used to. It's not about saving the day and getting a happy ending. It's about doing what you can, even if the payoff is small, even if the backlash is huge, and even then, even when you know you probably won't win, you fight anyway. That's what makes this Batman so powerful. It's real and it's raw, and there's one moment that really brings everything to a head. It's Bane's confrontation. Now, usually when Bane shows up in a Batman story, you know what to expect in terms of brute force and tactical, but in Absolute Batman, their showdown hits differently. Let me explain. In Absolute Batman issue number 9, Bruce Wayne faces a confrontation with Bane, but not the Bane that we're used to. This version is grotesque, almost demonic version of the villain. In the 90s, the sensation who once broke the bat from another universe, of course, that is a direct reference to the Nightfall issue where Bane breaks Batman's back. And here, that kind of moment plays out in a much darker and more unsettling way. Bruce is pushed to his absolute breaking point, both mentally and emotionally, and even physically. But before I point it all out, let me just point out that just before this, Bruce had gone through a brutal stretch investigating V-Corps and uncovering the truth about Mr. Freeze's experiment in issues number 7 and 8. He also lost his friend Matches Malone and revealed his identity to his childhood friends in what he called a suicide mission against Black Mask. All of that already had him questioning if he was really making a difference or just losing himself. So by the time he faces Bane, Bruce is actually facing everything he's been avoiding. We're talking about the guilt over his father's death, the damage he's done to his relationships, and the fear that maybe he's not saving Gotham at all. That's when Bane comes in, and that's when he's introduced. And he makes his entrance in the most brutal way possible. He crashes a private peace summit between the leaders of the Karak and Kadag. These are two nations trying to broker a ceasefire. Then, with a calm, almost polite tone, Bane informs them that their peace talks have broken down. Then he kills one of them instantly with his bare hands, and you know that happens so quickly and cleanly that you can feel the tension as if you were in that very same room with them. Yes, that single act sets a tone, and what makes it even more disturbing is how composed he is. He's pleasant, well-spoken, plus he feels philosophical even as he murders someone in cold blood. And then he meets Batman. From the jump, Bane controls the tempo. He fights with the slow confidence ease as he calls out Batman's attacks in his styles like he's complimenting a sparring partner. Then, in an instant, he paralyzes Bruce's arms and legs using pressure points, a different tack than his Absolute Batman universe. And just when you think it couldn't get any worse, it does. Bruce tries to provoke him by calling him a juicer to mock Bane's venom use, but Bane just smiles and says, "Friend, I'm not juiced up, and I haven't even used the stuff yet. But if you want to see what it does, alright, here we go, it's cool." Then he transforms. Once he activates his venom, his body swells into something massive and grotesque. Nick Dragotta's art goes all out in here. Bane's muscles balloon to impossible proportions, and his silhouette dwarfs Batman's completely. For real though, Batman barely reaches the height of one of Bane's arms. Then the issue ends with Bane gripping Bruce by the skull. He mockingly welcomes him and says it's time to get Batman prepped for surgery. That's a cliffhanger. And also, in this Absolute Batman universe, it's funny how in Nightfall, Bane broke the bat literally, but in this case, getting him prepped for surgery, it's almost like Bane is gonna break the bat in a whole nother way in his Absolute Batman universe. It's pretty insane. So that's the latest chapter of the time of writing the script for this video. Again, it's a brutal reimagination of the Nightfall moment we all know. This is what Absolute Batman does best. It takes the pieces we think we know and flips them on their heads. It uses your expectations against you. The story constantly reworks familiar beats in darker, more grounded ways. This is beyond just characters acting differently. The entire relationships to Bruce, to Gotham, and to each other are built on pain, survival, and years of shared history. It keeps you guessing, and more importantly, it makes you feel every moment feels fresh. Alright, now that we talked about what makes this version of Batman so unique, here's another question. How does Absolute Batman compare to everything else we've seen in Batman stories before? Take Scott Snyder's Court of Owls for example. It explores themes of Batman not truly knowing Gotham and confronting a hidden ancient conspiracy that had controlled the city for generations. And although Absolute Batman continues Snyder's deep interest in systematic corruption and the deconstruction of the character, there's another layer to it thanks to Bruce's working class identity and his direct involvement in Gotham's physical state as a civil engineer. And then there's Frank Miller's Batman Year One. That book gave us a grounded look at Batman's first year on the job. It was full of missteps, real stakes, and deep Gotham rot. Themes explored included the blurred lines between justice and law, ethics, and the institutional corruption of Gotham. And of course, while Absolute Batman shares this grounded, gritty tone, it takes the grounded aspect to an unprecedented level by making Bruce a blue-collar worker directly involved in Gotham's infrastructure, rather than just a billionaire. I'd say you can argue that Absolute Batman is a spiritual successor or a radical reinterpretation of Year One's grounded origins, especially because it removes Bruce's financial safety net. Next, now let's talk about Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns. That comic gave us an aging, retired Batman returning to dystopian, hyper-violent Gotham. He is shown grappling with his own limits and the complex role of heroes in a corrupt, media-saturated society. It deconstructs heroism by showing a Batman who operates outside the law. Absolute Batman shares a theme of a more brutal Batman operating in a deeply flawed city, and a deconstruction of what it means to be a hero when success isn't guaranteed. However, unlike The Dark Knight Returns, Absolute Batman features a young, evolving Bruce Wayne. Plus, Absolute Batman grounds his deconstruction in Bruce's lack of privilege, which makes his brutality a consequence of necessity and limited resources rather than a choice from a position of power. Okay, next, now let's also compare Jim Lee's Batman Hush. It's a big, fast-paced mystery story. It's full of twists, plots, surprise villains, and guest appearances from all across the DC universe. It's all about Batman using his brain to solve a mystery while also questioning who he can trust. But Absolute Batman is very different. In fact, it couldn't be more different. Yes, it also has familiar villains, but here they're tied directly to Bruce's past. This story doesn't revolve around solving any mystery. It's about Bruce's personal fight against a broken system and his own trauma. Ultimately, Absolute Batman is a full-blown rework of the established mythos. It takes the familiar and makes it dangerous again. And it shows us what Batman would be without his wealth. It's Bruce against despair, grief, systematic failure, and the fear that none of it might matter. And yet, of course, he still suits up and locks in and gets to work. Why? Because he's Batman. Now, Absolute Batman is indeed a phenomenally refreshing story. Indeed, Absolute Batman is a bold yet refreshing human take on the Dark Knight. It makes perfect sense why it's one of the best selling comics of 2024, if not the best selling, but it's gangster. I've seen a lot of coverage on it, and I was compelled to make to do a video on this. So now I want to hear from you. Does Absolute Batman change the way you see the Dark Knight? Come on, let us continue the conversation as comment guys. I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts. So thank you again for watching the video. This video is sponsored by coffee. If you'd like to buy a boy a cup of coffee, link in description, or donate to the super thanks. But the greatest compliment you guys can do is by liking this video and subscribing to RatedComics YouTube channel. And don't forget to check out RatedComics.com for some really cool limited print Rated Comic exclusives to add to your comic book collection. Thank you again for watching. Till the next upload.